In episode 1, the story begins in the 9th year of Viserys Targaryen I's reign, 172 years before the birth of Daenerys. Before him, tragedy befell the two sons of King Jaehaerys, who had reigned for nearly 60 years, and so there were questions about his succession. It was between Princess Rhaenys Targaryen, the king's eldest descendant, and her younger cousin, Prince Viserys Targaryen, the king's eldest male descendant. Of course, we know that Viserys inherits the Iron Throne. We meet the first dragon, Syrax, who Viserys' daughter Rhaenyra is riding this episode. Rhaenyra's mother, Viserys' wife, is currently very pregnant, hopefully with the king and queen's male heir, because Rhaenyra is their only daughter at this time. As for the current politics, we hear from Lord Corlys that there is a growing alliance among the cities. They've banded together in a place called the Stepstones, and somebody named Draha, or the Crab Feeder, is calling himself the Prince Admiral of that territory. The king doesn't really see this as an issue though. Just then, Rhaenyra walks into the meeting. She is her father's cupbearer. Rhaenyra goes into the room where the Iron Throne is, and she finds her cousin there, the king's brother, Daemon. The king has named him commander of the City Watch, but he hasn't made his presence known at court. You see, as long as the king doesn't have a male heir, he considers himself next in line to the Iron Throne. The two tease each other, but they are really close. Alicent, who is Rhaenyra's close friend, her father is the king's hand, asks Rhaenyra whether she worries about her position, especially if her mother were to give birth to a son. She might not be as doted on by her father. Rhaenyra just wants to ride on Dragonback and eat cake though. She doesn't seem worried about the line of succession or her place in it. The king is being treated by his physicians, called maesters, for what looks like a boil on his lower back. The wound refuses to heal. He and his wife, however, have a loving and close marriage, and they talk about the upcoming birth of their child. Viserys is certain that it's a son, and she tells him that this is going to be her last time. She's lost 5 pregnancies in just as many years. Daemon is riling up his troops, telling them that his brother's territory is falling to ruin, but tonight King's Landing will learn to fear the color gold, he says. That evening, they take to the streets, inflicting violence and chaos on the city people, torturing and killing. It turns out, though, that these were all criminals that he was getting rid of. The City Watch, of course, is an extension of the crown, so some on the King's Council are concerned, but Daemon maintains that the city people should be safe from criminals. Viserys doesn't really approve of his methods. He says he just wishes that it wouldn't take maiming half the city to keep the other half safe. He does defend Daemon somewhat, though, as he acknowledges that King's Landing has been in decline. Sometime later, it's the day of the tournament to be held in honor of the king's heir, who was due to be born any minute. This is where we get the first look of Sir Criston Cole, the common-born son of another lord's steward. It's said that he bested the Baratheon men off their horses, so he's very good. He asks for the princess's favor, and she gives it to him. The queen is having an incredibly difficult labor. The baby is in breach and she is in a lot of pain. Viserys then agrees to a C-section, but sadly, neither mother nor child, a son named Balon, survive. At the funeral, one of the dragons, Dracarys, cremates the mother and child. Lord Corlys of Driftmark suggests that Daemon is next in line, but Otto, the king's right hand, thinks Daemon is too unpredictable, impulsive, violent. Otto suggests that Rhaenyra be named. Viserys isn't ready to talk about it. His wife and son have just died and he's still grieving. Later, in private, Otto tells Alicent that she should go and offer comfort to the king. She goes to keep him company while he builds his model of the city. Daemon, in a packed brothel, announces the king's son heir for a day, and for him, the evening turns into a celebratory one. Viserys is upset by this and he asks Daemon if he said it, and Daemon admits it. He then sends Daemon out of the city and says that he'll name a new heir. He summons Rhaenyra, and she is officially named heir to the Iron Throne. He tells her then of a dream where King Aegon foresaw the end of the world of men, which will start with a winter, and when it comes, this winter, a Targaryen needs to be on the Iron Throne, and all of Westeros needs to be united. Aegon called this dream the Song of Ice and Fire. This is the secret that has been passed down from king to heir, and so now it's been passed down to Rhaenyra. In episode 2, there is chaos in the Stepstones, and the trouble that Lord Corlys warned about has escalated. 4 ships, including one of his own, have gone missing, and he feels the king's court hasn't been paying attention to a very real threat. He wants to seize the Stepstones and force the Crab Feeder out, but King Viserys doesn't want to start a war with the 3 cities. Rhaenyra offers her talents as a dragon rider, saying that it would be a show of force, but Otto shuts it down. The king suggests that she's sent to to check on the King's Guard posting instead. At the posting, which are kind of interviews or introductions, one of the soldiers introduced is Sir Criston Cole. This is who Rhaenyra picks because he has combat experience. Otto doesn't like it, but Rhaenyra insists that her father be protected by somebody who knows combat. The matter is closed. King Viserys and Alicent bond as he tells her about his model of the city. He asks her then about Rhaenyra and how she's coping in the wake of her mother's death. Alicent encourages him to reach out to Rhaenyra. By the way, it's been 6 months since the death of the Queen. After a heated conversation about the Stepstone situation, King Viserys, Lord Corlys, and his wife, Rhaenys, make peace. They agree that a show of strength is indeed needed. Lord Corlys suggests joining the two families by having the king marry their daughter Laena. This would unite the two remaining Valyrian houses. The king admits that he hasn't thought of marriage. That evening at dinner, he and Rhaenyra finally break some ice and they start talking. They talk of their mutual love for Rhaenyra's mother. Viserys also approves of her selecting Sir Cole to the King's Guard, but he makes it clear that the issue with the Stepstones is not her place. The king's finger seems to have some gangrene, so his physicians, the maesters, are giving him maggot treatment. During this, he tells Otto about his meeting with Rhaenys and Lord Corlys and their marriage proposal. So Laena and King Viserys meet, and she's very well trained for her role to be a royal wife and bear the royal aristocratic children, but she's a child. She's 12 years old, and you can see the discomfort on the king's face. He does not wish to do this. The king and Alicent are still spending platonic time together. She presents to him a part of a sculpture that had broken since she had gotten the stonemasons to fix it, and he's clearly moved by the gesture. The news arrives then that Daemon has stolen a dragon egg and that he will be taking a second wife. She's pregnant, he says, and he will have the egg placed in the baby's cradle. Rhaenyra asks which egg he took, and the Dragonminder says that he took the one that had been chosen for her late baby brother Balon. So the king's men, led by Otto, go to confront Daemon at Dragonstone. Daemon dares Otto to take the egg. Swords are drawn, but just then, Daemon's dragon shows itself and Otto knows that he and his men don't stand a chance. Then Rhaenyra comes in on her dragon to confront him, and she says that her father named her Princess of Dragonstone, so technically this castle is hers. But Daemon reminds her that it's not until she comes of age. After an exchange of words, she gets the egg. Otto is clearly threatened and unhappy about her show of power. It's also revealed that Daemon's new wife, well, the sex worker, and kind of a friend to him who he claimed he was going to be taking as a second wife, is not actually pregnant. That was a bluff. King Viserys is angry at first that the princess would risk her life by going to Dragonstone alone, but he does admit to her point that she retrieved the egg without bloodshed. He also makes more strides in patching things up with her. She says that she understands that it's his duty to marry again, knowing, because he's now told her, that nobody could replace her mother. The king then announces to his small council that he intends to marry the Lady Alicent Hightower. Rhaenyra feels betrayed and she runs off, as does Lord Corlys. He points out that unlike the Targaryens, who were dragon lords, the Valyrians had to struggle for an existence from the sea. He's actually talking to Daemon at this point. He summoned Daemon to Driftmark in his anger, and he reminds Daemon about the problem at the Stepstones and how that could be an opportunity to prove themselves. In episode 3, we're in the Stepstones where there's looting and chaos among the Triarchy, and we see a disfigured man in a mask torturing another, who refers to him as Prince Drahar. All of a sudden, Daemon arrives on Dragonback, and his dragon sets fire to everything, sending everyone into the caves in retreat. Daemon demands that Drahar come out and face him, but Drahar doesn't. Daemon gets wounded then by an arrow to the shoulder and he flies off. Meanwhile, at the castle in King's Landing, the king's son Aegon is 2 years old, and the king is publicly doting on his heir. One of the men brings news from the troubles at the Stepstones. He tells how the crab feeder and his men have sabotaged some ships, but the king doesn't want to hear it right now. The whereabouts of Rhaenyra at this time are unknown, but she's outside reading, and Alicent, who is pregnant, goes to summon her. Alicent wants to reach out to Rhaenyra, mend fences, but Rhaenyra is having none of it. She eventually reluctantly joins her father and Alicent on the hunt. This celebration is mostly for her half-brother, so she feels a bit left out. There is also a lot of gossip around about how badly the king is bungling the Stepstone situation. He can't keep ignoring it. Jason Lannister then suggests to Rhaenyra that they be a good match for marriage. She figures out later that her father set that up, and they have a confrontation. She must marry, he says, but he does later admit that he doesn't wish to command her, he just wants her to be happy. Just then, Otto interrupts to tell Viserys that the huntsmen have reported a sighting of a white hart, a stag. We learn later that before the dragons ruled Westeros, it was the white stag that was the symbol of royalty. This is also a sign of favor from the gods, according to Otto, as the king should soon name his son his heir. Rey mounts her horse and rides off, and Ser Criston goes after her. They chat a bit as they walk through the forest. So today is meant to be the day that Viserys is to name Aegon as his heir. He seems reluctant to do so, though. Then the scheming hand Otto suggests that Rhaenyra marry Prince Aegon. Viserys laughs in his face at the absurdity of it, and he's sick of the politicking, he says. Viserys is also drinking a lot now, by the way. The huntsmen bring a stag to the king, but unfortunately it's not a white stag. But later on, the white stag appears to Rhaenyra. At this point, it's Otto who is pushing Alicent's hand to encourage the king to name Aegon as his heir. At first she pushes back, feeling bad that her son would be stripping Rhaenyra of her birthright. Viserys still doesn't want to get involved with the troubles at the Stepstones, but it's getting harder to ignore. He decides to send aid to Daemon. Finally, the crab feeder comes out of his caves when Daemon waves a white flag. This is bait, though, to bring them out of the caves, and Daemon fights and kills his way through the crab feeder's men. But he eventually gets wounded and trapped. But just when it looks as though it's about to be over for Daemon, Lord Corlys' son and the rest of the men, aid from the king, arrive on Dragonback and destroy the rest of the crab feeder's men. Daemon follows the crab feeder into the cave, and we see him drag out the crab feeder's torso. He is victorious. In episode 4, Rhaenyra is supposed to be finding a husband, but she's rejected every suitor presented to her so far. Everyone at court is tense, and Daemon comes in. He wears a crown after being named King of the Narrow Sea following his victory over the Triarchy at the Stepstones. He kneels then, saying that he knows there is only one true king. Then the brothers, Viserys and Daemon, embrace. Rhaenyra and Alicent seem to be a little friendlier now. Alicent asks her how her tour to find a husband went and reminds her that she's lucky to even get her pick out of many suitors. Rhaenyra says that these suitors only want her name and Valyrian blood for their heirs, and that being trapped in a castle squeezing out heirs isn't romantic. Noticing that this unintentionally hurt Alicent, because that's kind of the reality of her situation, Rhaenyra apologizes. They both say then how much they've missed one another. During the small council, Otto informs King Viserys that he's heard word that Lord Corlys is in negotiations to wed Laena to the Sea Lord of Braavos' son. An alliance between them and the Free Cities would mean that House Targaryen would need to seek their own marriage pact. Rhaenyra finds a letter in her room, a map of hidden passages in her rooms, and a change of clothes. She changes into the plain clothes, clearly meant to disguise her, and she follows the passages, leading her to Daemon, who takes her out into the city. They wander through the city's sex dungeons, and they eventually make out. It goes a little further before Daemon eventually stops it, causing Rhaenyra to feel humiliated and rejected. Meanwhile, things aren't going well for Alicent. The king summons her late at night to perform her wifely duties. I put it that way because she does not look as though she's enjoying it, but I suppose she's in no position to deny the king. After Daemon runs off, Rhaenyra goes back to the castle and invites Ser Criston to her room, and she sleeps with him. Details of her adventures out in the city finally make their way to court, to the king. Otto tells King Viserys that Daemon and Rey were seen together in the bowels of a pleasure den, coupling. The king doesn't buy it. Alicent overhears this, and she confronts Rhaenyra, who denies this on the life of her mother. Daemon never touched her, she says. The king angrily summons Daemon, and Daemon says that he would take Rhaenyra as his wife, but the king banishes him. Again, the king shows Rhaenyra a blade then, and there's some writing engraved on it. From my blood comes the prince that was promised, and his will be the song of ice and fire. Then he warns her about not being careful. When she points out the double standard between men and women, he agrees with her, but he tells her that she will marry Sir Laena Velaryon, the son of Corlys, the sea snake. The house of the dragon will stand as one, he says. She tells her father then that Otto wants Aegon to be heir, and he'll stop at nothing to ruin her. He needs to rein Otto in. The king calls Otto in then and tells him that his goals are no longer aligned with those of the realm. He thanks Otto and relieves him of his service. At the end of the episode, one of the king's maester's advisors brings Rhaenyra a tea to rid her of any unwanted consequences of her night out in the city. But nobody knows yet that the unwanted consequence could potentially be what happened between her and Ser Criston. In episode 5, we finally meet Daemon's real wife, They haven't consummated their marriage, and she makes fun of him for being cast aside by his brother the king. She asks him, "What will you do now? Cast down the little child?" to get his claim on the throne. And she senses then that he's a threat. Before she can make a move to defend herself, he causes her to fall off her horse and onto her back. As he walks away, she remarks, "I knew you couldn't finish." So he picks up a rock and walks over to her, and it's implied that he's going to kill her. Alicent says goodbye to her father. Remember, she vouched for Rhaenyra with the king, which in turn got the king thinking that he could no longer trust Otto, because Otto was the one who brought these quote-unquote false rumors to him. Otto tells Alicent that when the king dies, there will be war, and for Rhaenyra to ascend the throne, she would have to send Alicent's children to the sword if she felt that that's what she had to do. He implores her to prepare Aegon to rule. Viserys and Rhaenyra make it to House Velaryon. The creepy and mysterious Lord Larys spots Alicent in the gardens and presumably knows that she might be vulnerable now that her father is gone. Larys' father took Otto's place, by the way. He starts stirring the pot right away by telling Alicent that the Grand Maester brought some tea to Rhaenyra's chambers. Alicent knows exactly what that was, and she mistakenly believes then that the rumor about Rhaenyra and Daemon was true, and that Rhaenyra lied to her. She vouched for Rhaenyra, and her father was sent away for nothing. Lord Corlys and Rhaenys welcome King Viserys, and he looks and sounds rather unwell. Corlys tells the king that Daemon's wife died in a horse riding accident. They all know that it's very suspicious since she was an excellent horse rider. Now remember, the king is there to arrange the marriage between Sir Laenor and Rhaenyra. Lord Corlys would like to know how the succession will be handled. He also wants the children to be named after their father. The king agrees, however, when any of the children ascend the throne, it will be with the name Targaryen. Lord Corlys thinks that this is a fair deal. Sir Laenor and Rhaenyra walk on the beach and they talk, and she tells him in a roundabout way that she understands that this isn't a love match. She knows that he's gay, but that they should perform their duties to the realm and they can discreetly be with whomever they wish to be with. Laenor and his lover Joffrey frolic about the beach. Joffrey says that this is better than anything that they could have hoped for, since Rhaenyra has a lover of her own as well. This lover is Sir Criston, who is starting to get other ideas about what this arrangement really is. He asks her whether she would choose the path of freedom with him. He's asking her to run away with him and leave everything behind. She could marry him, a real love marriage. She tells him that it's her duty to marry Sir Laenor, but her marriage doesn't have to be the end. She tells Criston about her deal with Laenor. This upsets Criston because he's given up his chastity for her and he won't settle for being just her lover anymore. Alicent later summons Sir Criston and she tells him about the rumor between Daemon and Rhaenyra without actually mentioning Daemon's name. Criston admits that it happened. He admits everything, thinking that Alicent is actually talking about him, that he and Rhaenyra slept together. Now Alicent knows about them. Celebrations are underway at the castle as a deal has been reached on the marriage between Laenor and Rhaenyra. To the surprise of everyone, Daemon walks in. Then Alicent, dressed in green. It's a big moment as she interrupts the king's speech. Sir Larys mentions that the beacon on the high tower glows green when the Old Town calls its banners to war. This kind of implies that after being betrayed by Rhaenyra and having Aegon sidelined by the king, Alicent seems to be taking her father's advice, and I guess the high towers have officially entered this contest to the Iron Throne. Sir Criston seethes as the king announces that there will be tournaments and feasting and then a wedding. The couple, Rhaenyra and Laenor, perform their first dance. Later, Laenor and his lover Joffrey discover that it's Sir Criston who's Rhaenyra's lover. Joffrey goes over to suss Criston out and tells them that they should just guard each other's secrets, keep them both safe. Daemon mentions that his late wife was to inherit a place called Runestone, and since they had no heirs, he'll be flying over there, presumably to stake his claim on it. Daemon and Rhaenyra dance then, and he stirs the pot by asking Rhaenyra if this is what she really wants. They get a little too close, but suddenly there's a riot in the castle. Turns out that it's a completely unhinged Criston Cole. He beats Joffrey to death in front of everybody. Just as he's about to take his own life later, Alicent stops him. Rhaenyra and Laenor say their vows, and the king, who had suffered a nosebleed moments before, collapses. In episode 6, this episode opens with Rhaenyra giving birth to a son. The Queen Alicent says that the child has to be brought to her, and Rhaenyra insists, moments after childbirth, to walk herself there. Laenor accompanies her. The king is already doting on his new grandson, who is named Joffrey. Alicent is most curious about the hair color, of course, because it's obvious that Laenor isn't the child's biological father. Rhaenyra has 2 other children as well, boys named Luke, Lucerys, and Jace, Jacaerys. Later, Sir Harwin, the commander of the City Watch, asks to hold the new baby Joffrey, and it's clear that he and Rhae are very close. The rumors are that Sir Harwin is the one who fathered Rhaenyra's children. One of Rhae's sons is being trained to master his dragon so that it may only obey him. Aegon, Alicent's son, tells his younger brother Aemond that they feel bad he doesn't have a dragon. He's the only one without one. So they play a prank on young Aemond, presenting him with a pig. Alicent also has a daughter, Helena, who has an interest in bugs and animals. Alicent goes to the king then to complain that Rhaenyra's children are bullying Aemond. He asks how she isn't sure that it isn't their son Aegon who put them up to it. Then she brings up the matter of Rhaenyra's son's paternity, but the king won't hear of it. She goes over to Aegon then and tries to get through to him that he should be king one day. Daemon and Laena are currently in Pentos as a married couple. There, they're offered a permanent residence by the Prince Regio. They have children of their own too, daughters. Laena doesn't want to stay there, but Daemon does. Laena feels that the family belongs in Driftmark on their homeland, but Daemon doesn't seem interested in debating the matter. Meanwhile, back in King's Landing, there's a scuffle out on the yard where Lord Harwin and Criston have a fight. Criston having baited Sir Harwin, using some vile comments about Rhaenyra's children. Harwin beats Sir Criston up until the others pull him off, and Criston smugly laughs, knowing that he's touched a nerve. Rhaenyra overhears Harwin arguing with his father. His father is angry about the rumors of Rhaenyra's children's paternity, and now the fight with Criston, his father's had it. Rhaenyra and Laenor have a disagreement. He wants to go off sailing, and she tells him that for 10 years he's had his fill of lovers and royal wine at court, but the rumors are starting to catch up with him now, and it's time to get it together. She commands him to stay at her side in King's Landing. During a small council meeting, Rhaenyra proposes that they marry her son Jacaerys to Alicent's daughter Helena and have them rule together. Harwin's father goes to resign from his position, and the king rejects his resignation. He does grant Sir Harwin's father permission, however, to escort his son from court back home. While this is happening, Larys goes to a group of prisoners and sets them free, in exchange for them committing arson for him. He also has their tongues cut out so they may never confess to what they did. Meanwhile, in Pentos, Daemon's wife Helena is having an extremely difficult childbirth. She goes out to Jacaerys then, and he gives her the dignified death by fire that she wanted. Harwin says his goodbyes to Rhaenyra and their sons, and he promises to see them again. Jace does ask at one point if Harwin is his father. Rhaenyra decides then that they're going to leave King's Landing and head for Dragonstone. She's been undermined and she can't stand the whispers in the halls. At the end of the episode, the men that Larys set free set fire to a place called Harrenhal, where Harwin, his father, and some others were staying. They're burned alive. Alicent is appalled because Larys seems to think that he did this for her, and he confidently says that she will reward him one day when the time is right. In episode 7, it's Lady Laena's funeral as she set out to sail at sea for her final voyage, and Daemon is being a little bit belligerent. Sir Criston points out to Alicent that Larys has been openly staring at her, and she says that it's just a look of pride because now he's the new lord of Harrenhal, since he did murder his father and brother. Jace goes over to his cousins and offers them some comfort and support. King Viserys asks Daemon to come back home to King's Landing, and Daemon refuses and he walks off. The king accidentally calls Alicent by his late wife's name. Rhaenys tells Lord Corlys that she wants Driftmark to go through Laena's line to Baelor. If you're wondering who that is, it's one of Laena's daughters. That would mean disinheriting their son, but she points out that he will be the king's consort and one day sit on the Iron Throne. Also, Rhaenyra's children aren't of his blood, but Laena's are. They are true Valyrian blood. While walking on the beach, Rhaenyra tells Daemon about her marriage to Sir Laenor. They try to conceive a child to no avail, and it was miserable. So she had to find that kind of happiness elsewhere. See, the two are close and they have a friendship, but he's gay, so they could never be together. She asks if he loved his wife, Laena, and he says that they were happy enough. This is when Daemon and Rhaenyra finally sleep together. Meanwhile, Alicent's younger son Aemond manages to master one of the dragon. He mounts it and goes dragon riding. Now remember, once you master a dragon, it will only obey your commands. When he comes back to the castle, Laena's girls are upset. You see, it was one of her daughters to claim because it was Laena's dragon, but as Aemond points out, well then she should have claimed it. Laena and Rhaenyra's children and Aemond start fighting each other. One of Rhaenyra's sons stabs Aemond in the eye then, and he loses it as a result. Luke and Jace's paternity issue comes to a boiling point. In fact, that's the reason why the boys were fighting. Aemond had called them bastards. Eventually the king, who doesn't really want to open that can of worms, tells them all to just apologize. The fighting has to stop. Alicent says that this is not enough. She demands one of Rhaenyra's son's eyes in return. She demands that Sir Criston bring her Jace's eye. Obviously he's ready to do anything to please her and spite Rhaenyra. Alicent takes her blade and she charges at Rhae and slices at her enough to draw blood in front of everybody. Aemon says then that it was a fair exchange. He may have lost an eye, but he gained a dragon. Rhaenyra and Laenor have a talk and he says that his lover will soon be returning to the Stepstones to fight, and Laenor says that he will recommit to Rhaenyra and raising their sons. Rhaenyra then tells Daemon that she needs him because she can't face the Greens alone. The Greens being the Hightowers, Alicent and her people. She says that they should be a unit. He would be her prince consort and their claim would not be questioned. He says that they can't marry unless Sir Laenor is dead, so they arrange with Laenor's lover to stage a fight and stage the death of Laenor, while allowing them both to escape at sea. Rhaenyra and Daemon marry, and yay, they save the gays. In episode 8, Rhaenys tells a Maester that it's been 6 years since she last saw her husband. She asks if he's alive, and she's told that he was led into an ambush at sea, he got his neck slashed, and fell overboard. He lost a lot of blood and he currently has a fever. They should be home in about 3 days. She has hope, but Lord Corlys's brother Vaemond thinks that that's unrealistic. He also thinks that he should be on the Driftmark throne should Corlys die, because he is the closest to him in blood. In the meantime, Rhaenys has been on the throne, and she warns him that his words could be taken as treason. Jace is working hard at learning High Valyrian. Daemon shows Rhaenyra a letter then from Driftmark, in which Vaemond seeks to question Luke's legitimacy and by extension, Jace's and hers. Rhaenyra, who is pregnant, and Daemon decide that it's time to head back to King's Landing. Rhaenyra goes in to see her father. Both she and Daemon do. He's bedridden and very sick at this point, but he's very happy to see her, and it's a very heartwarming scene. Daemon tells him about the petition to decide on who's going to ascend the Driftmark throne. He tells Viserys that he should affirm his decision to have Luke, Lucerys, be Lord Corlys' successor. Rhaenyra also introduces her youngest children to her father, Aegon and Viserys. The other Aegon, Alicent's son, is very troubled. A young girl is brought to Alicent and she'd been assaulted by the prince. Alicent acts like a concerned, friendly figure to the girl, but makes her think that her reputation would be ruined if she told anybody. She pays the girl off and gives her the tea, just in case her son might have impregnated her. She goes then to yell at Aegon and tells him that he's no son of hers. She tells him that he's brought shame on his wife with all of his carrying on. Luke is concerned. He tells his brother Jace that everyone is looking at him and that no one would question his claim to the Driftmark throne if he looked more like Laenor than Harwin. Jace tells him that it doesn't matter what they think. Aemond, by the way, looks terrifying. Anyway, everybody from Driftmark arrives at King's Landing. Rhaenyra talks to Rhaenys and swears to her that she did not arrange Laena's death, nor was she complicit in it. Then she makes an offer. If Rhaenys backs Luke's claim to the Driftmark throne, they can marry Laena's children to hers. Baela would be Queen of the Seven Kingdoms and her sons heirs to the throne. Rhaena will rule Driftmark with Luke. The Hand hears all of the petitions for the Driftmark throne, but just then we get a spectacular moment where Viserys walks in, interrupting the proceedings. You see, he'd stopped taking this milk of the poppy that Alicent and Otto and his Maesters had been giving him because he wanted to be clear of mind, but this means that he's in a lot of pain. He is doing this though. Anyway, he makes his way to the throne, and when he gets there, Daemon helps him put his crown on. He says that he doesn't understand why there are petitions over a settled matter. Only Rhaenys can say what Corlys would have wanted. She comes forward then and says that he has always wanted the throne to go to Sir Laenor's son, Luke. And then she announces that Rhae had said that Laena's children should marry Rhaenyra's children. The king announces that the matter is settled. Vaemond is livid, telling the king that he has no right to decide this. He points to Luke and tells the king that that is no true Valyrian. He calls Rhaenyra's children bastards, and Rhaenyra, well, you know. In turn, Daemon decapitates him. King Viserys finally gets his wish to have a dinner with his whole family present, and for a while there's genuine peace between the families. The king is escorted out then as he grows tired, and that's when the kids start fighting. a provocation by Aegon. Rhaenyra wants to leave, but Alicent reaches out and says that she only just got there. Then Rhaenyra says that she'll take her sons back to Dragonstone and return on Dragonback, and Alicent says that she and the king would like that. That evening, Alicent gives the king his medicine. He thinks at this moment that he's talking to Rhaenyra, and he references the dream, the Song of Ice and Fire, and he tells her that it's true that the Promised Prince will unite the realm against the dark and the cold. Alicent thinks that he's talking to her about her son Aegon. Then he says, "It's you. You are the one." Again, thinking that it's Rhaenyra. She says that she understands. The king then passes away as he falls asleep. In episode 9, Alicent receives news of the king's passing. She tells her father that she saw him before his death, and he said that he wished for Aegon to be king. This is announced at the council. Some of the council were already plotting for this, but Lord Beesbury, one of the king's allies, speaks out and doubts that the king would have wanted that. So Criston promptly kills him. Otto says that Rhaenyra can't be allowed to remain free. They'll be given the opportunity to swear fealty to the new king, but Alicent points out that neither Rhaenyra nor Daemon would ever bend the knee. Otto thinks that a sacrifice should be made if necessary, but Alicent refuses to condemn Rhaenyra to her death. A secret search is underway for Prince Aegon, who has been out in the city all night. Rhaenys is also suddenly locked in her rooms. Remember, she'd come to King's Landing because of the Driftmark petition matter. Others aren't allowed to leave the castle until they bend the knee to the new king. Those that don't are taken away by the guards, presumably to be imprisoned or killed. Those who try to escape are brought back and imprisoned. So it seems Aegon likes to frequent children's fighting matches, and not only that, he has a couple of children running about. 2 men, servants of the keep, are looking for Aegon as well, and a woman says that she can lead them to her mistress who knows of Aegon's whereabouts. Alicent tries to form an alliance with Rhaenys, telling her that all of Driftmark would be hers and her family's to do with as they wish. Rhaenys admits that Alicent is smart, smarter than she ever gave her credit for, but she's still working in service of men. Her father, her husband, her son. She only wants to make a window in her prison, but doesn't she wish to be on the Iron Throne herself? Alicent is momentarily shaken, but she ends up leaving Rhaenys, telling her to ring the bell when she has an answer. It ends up being Daemon's ex-lover who has Aegon. She demands payment, but most importantly, she demands an end to the child exploitation and fights. She says that the crown has been looking the other way, but it needs to stop. She reminds the Han that she could have easily killed his grandson, and he should remember that. Aegon is found, but he really doesn't want to be king. He says he'd rather sail away and never be found. He says himself that he's not suited to be king. It's revealed then what Alicent and Larys get up to behind closed doors. She allows him to pleasure himself while looking at her bare feet. He also reveals to her that one of her handmaidens is a spy for her father. Rhaenys manages to escape with the help of one of the guards, and she hides in amongst the rest of the people as it's announced that Aegon is king. She sneaks out then and goes to the tunnels. Aegon, who has since been reluctant, suddenly enjoys the applause after he's crowned. This is interrupted by Rhaenys on her dragon that mercilessly doesn't kill them, even though she could and maybe should have. Then she flies away. In episode 10, the final episode of season 1, Rhaenys brings news to Rhaenyra of Viserys' death and that Aegon has been named king. She tells them that the Greens are coming and that they should leave Dragonstone at once. This sudden news causes Rhaenyra to go into labor, and unfortunately her child is stillborn. At the funeral, a small group swear fealty to her as their queen. Her council is also gathering support. The Starks are mentioned then, as the council assumes that they would have the Starks' support, and with that the North might follow. They do a tally on the dragons, and Daemon says that Dragonstone has 13 dragons and House Hightower has 4. Just then they're alerted to incoming Hightower ships. Otto offers their terms. Swear fealty to Aegon, and the crown will confirm that Dragonstone is theirs to pass on to Jacaerys upon Rhaenyra's death. Luke will be confirmed as the heir to Driftmark, and Rhaenyra's sons, with Daemon, will get high positions in court. Rhaenyra tells Otto that King's Landing will have her answer tomorrow. Daemon and Rhaenyra have a disagreement. He's willing to go to war for her claim to the throne, and she isn't. War is always the last resort, and it wouldn't be in the best interest of the people. Lord Corlys and Rhaenys both arrive at Dragonstone. He says that the Hightower treason cannot stand, and Rhaenyra has his support. He informs Rhaenyra that because of his fighting at the Stepstones, he now controls it and the Narrow Sea. They could cut off trade to King's Landing. Rhaenyra then sends her sons, Lucerys and Jacaerys, on Dragonback to the Starks and the Baratheons to remind them of their oath to support her as rightful heir. Luke makes it to see Lord Boros at Storm's End to remind him of his father's oath. He sees then that Aemon beat him to it. Lord Boros sends him away. Aemon challenges Luke to a fight, fight, but he says no. As Aemond lunges at him, Lord Boros stops him and says that he won't have any bloodshed in his court. As Luke is flying away on Dragonback, Aemond catches up with him and challenges him again. At one point, you can hear Aemond shouting, "Vhagar, no, no," but it's too late. Vhagar attacks and kills Luke, sending him flying from the sky. It would appear that this is an accident. Daemon brings news to Rhaenyra, and her look at the end of the episode likely means war. And that is the end of season 1 of House of the Dragon. Thank you for watching.